I'll be honest, I'm gonna rate this bike on the street. I will still rev it out a little bit, damn it. Once a squid, always a squid, man. That's what I say. It's not every day you get to review a living legend. Folks, today's going to be a great one. We have got here a pristine example of a 2008 Yamaha YZF R6. Now, those of you who are familiar, you know this is a legendary super sport motorcycle. It has more wins under its belt than any other 600 class bike. It's absolutely dominated on the racetrack, and that's for good reason. This thing is an uncompromising, out-and-out sport bike that is just wanting to tear up the track. So why is it so freaking popular on the street? Well, we're going to find out today in our first impression ride and review of this, a 2008 Yamaha YZF R6. This motorcycle is special because it's actually a giveaway motorcycle. Yes, I am giving away this pristine example 2008 Yamaha R6 because, well, I just love you guys so much. So if you head over to yammyanoob.co, hit that link down below and become a member, I will give you max entries for the month to win this Yamaha R6. That is a great deal, and you're not going to want to miss out on that. Alternatively, you can head over to shop.yammyanoob.co and get yourself 3x entries for the next few days or so on any dollar you spend to get entered to win this motorcycle. You're not going to want to miss it. If you've wanted to own the legend, own the icon, a motorcycle that is appreciating in value, I might add, you're going to want to check out this bike right here. So, we've got a lot to talk about today. I think it's best we swing a lug over this machine, give you all the ins and outs of it, and tell you how it feels to ride. All right, we're going to kick on this motorcycle. You notice the cockpit here is pretty standard stuff, you know? We've got a nice big sweeping analog tachometer right there in the middle, speedometer, indicators, gas, light, no gauge, and that's about it. So let's go ahead and fire her up, shall we? Very simplistic controls here. Yamaha did not mess around much in 2008. I think this is the same switch cluster that a WR250R uses. So let's go ahead and turn this thing on. It's a classic sound, isn't it? Classic R6 startup. No muss, no fuss, nothing like a Ducati. Just works so well. Take a listen to this exhaust. It's got a full Leo Vinci system with a flash on it as well, which we're going to discuss in today's video. Let's take a listen. 15,800 RPM redline on this bad boy, and that is fantastic. Let's go take it out on the road, shall we? Out on the road with the Yamaha R6. And there's something so special about these bikes, man. Here's the thing. Everybody decries the death of the 600, and I kind of agree as well. And I get it, man. Manufacturers aren't making money on these things anymore. Nobody's buying these things anymore. They're definitely a dying breed of motorcycle. And I'm just so happy that we made so many of them, because this feeling is like no other. This bike makes you feel like a racer. Even if you're cruising along behind some random Porsche SUV, I think it's just the feeling it gives you is like no other motorcycle. The fact that it has this screaming 599cc race-inspired 4-cylinder motor, it just makes it super unique and different, you know? What's this guy doing? Guess he's turning out to where he lives, I suppose. Now this one might need a little bit of additional tuning, because it does seem to not really love neutral throttle as much, but I'm definitely going to take it out on track. Front brakes need to be bled a little bit, but overall it's a fantastic experience. We'll get this thing on the pipe a little bit. I don't think there's any traffic in front of us except for that guy. We can still rev it out a little bit, damn it. That's freaking sweet. So that's the thing about the R6, man. It's a race bike. There's just no other way to describe it. This motorcycle deserves, it wants to, and it needs to be on track. You guys can say whatever you want about it being a great street bike and blah, 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 but I think if you only spend time on the street on an R6, you're really missing the point of the bike, you know? This thing was really designed to be a thoroughbred race machine. And I'm not saying that you can't enjoy it on the street, because to be honest, it is a fun street bike. The fact that you can really squeeze it and just, it feels like you're going a million miles an hour all the time. It's got this incredibly committed riding stance, very aggressive ergonomics. And so while you're out on this motorcycle, you feel like Ricky Racer, you know? You feel like you're about to, you know, pit out of a track and go attack some corners, because that's how the bike makes you feel all the time. And that's the thing about motorcycling that I want to get across to you guys. It's the way a bike makes you feel. And I've ridden the R7, I've ridden the R1, I've ridden basically all of Yamaha's motorcycles, and they're all pretty freaking good, I'm not gonna lie. And the MT bikes are fantastic street bikes, but you know, if you want the feeling of being a racer, there's really no bike that does it quite like the R6, I gotta say. No motorcycle is gonna give you these racer feelings that the R6 gives you. And to be honest, every motorcycle requires something a little different, right? Like this motorcycle, obviously you need to keep the revs up, right? Like right here, if I wanted to really attack, you know, I would be in first gear, not second gear. And I definitely wouldn't be behind some random Kia SUV. But at the same time, I have enough power to kind of manage these curves. Like, I think a lot of people say that 600s are completely gutless and they're not worth owning because they just have no balls down low. But I don't know, at the same time, if you just change your paradigm of riding, you can get used to these things. Much like if you're used to riding an R6 and you jump on an ADV bike, you're gonna have to change your riding style a little bit. You're gonna have to use that torque of that motor, sit a little bit more upright, a little bit more confident, controlled. This motorcycle is, I can't stress to you guys enough how ludicrously aggressive the R6 is for street duty. The fact that people were selling so many R6s and 600 class bike in the mid-2000s really kind of, if you guys didn't live through that era like I did, and I was young, but I still remember it very well, you know, it was the housing bubble, things were crazy, it's like the economy could never go bad. I mean, that's why people bought so many of these, right? Because they were probably doing coke on a house they just bought on a Ninja loan, and they went out and enjoyed themselves on their R6s, right? But the fun really stopped in 2008, 2009. You know, sport bike sales really fell off a cliff because, you know, the first thing that people cut in terms of their discretionary spending was motorcycles, because it didn't really make a lot of sense to, you know, go out and buy a $10,000 Super Sport 600 class bike if you couldn't make your mortgage payment and you were upside down on your mortgage and you just had a really bad time. That would not be good, right? So let's go over the basic stats of this bike. Why is it so rigid? Why is it so racy? And why is it so fun to use regardless of all those things? So first of all, the Yamaha R6 features an ultra rigid aluminum delta box frame. That's a fancy terminology from Yamaha that describes their architecture for the frame. They've been using it since the 80s, but really the frame is what dictates so much of the rigidity of the R6. This bike, other than my Daytona, which is like full prepped and it's a very close competitor to this machine, I've never felt a bike that's so rigid on the side of the tire. A bike that just wants to stay on the side of the tire. You get it over and it just parks it. You have planted your line and it will not deviate unless you tell it to do something different. The R6 is telepathic in the way that it handles, and it's beautiful for that, you know? It's a thoroughbred machine. Slow speeds are a little awkward because of the ergonomics. You're in this super committed, leaned over ninja-like stance, you know? This engine just wants to go, go, go all the time. It's so much fun. So cool to be cruising at like 8,000 or 9,000 RPM, you know? But yeah, that's partially the reason why the bike handles so aggressively, is the frame and the geometry of the bike. Super aggressive rake angle, super stiff frame. This bike wants one thing, and it's to attack corners. But the star of the show really is this 599cc inline 4. 128 horsepower and 45 foot-pounds of torque in this configuration from 2008. This was a motor that, you know, actually produced a lot of power for what it is. And this one with the full exhaust and flash, it makes every bit of those 128 ponies. We're definitely going to get this thing out on the boil a little bit, and y'all will see what I'm talking about. But the cool thing about the R6 is, you know, it makes all 128 horsepower, but if you're a rider that's used to kind of high power motorcycles, it's a bike you can actually play with pretty reasonably on the street. You're still nowhere near what it can do on track, and I'm really curious to see how this thing's going to feel on track in this kind of bone stock configuration. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a hint. We are going to make a lot of mods to this thing. It's got these ridiculous squid mods like the levers, the windshield. I want to get a different tune on it, maybe a different exhaust, stickier tires, kind of get this thing to be a nice prepped bike that we can go have some fun with. But you know, even in stock configuration, it's pretty good. And you're able to really use the bike and have some fun with the bike if you're used to higher torque, higher horsepower motorcycles. At R6, actually, again, you're not even close to approaching the limit on the street, but it's still a fun bike. All right, let's get a little pulling, shall we? The sensation of speed is so great. You're not going that fast, so to speak. It's a 600, but at the same time, it revs out so high and you're in this tucked in position, you feel like you're going a bajillion miles an hour. And again, that's the thing this bike comes back to, is the feeling. It's the feeling that this thing gives me that basically no modern motorcycle can give you. A 600 is just different, man. It's why it's my favorite class of sport bike. It's why I still have my Daytona, which isn't quite an R6, right? But boy, these things are fun. Gotta watch the traffic here. All right, we're good. The sensation of speed is intoxicating. You really feel like you're going so fast. I'm only doing about 65 right now, but I feel like I'm going 100. And that's great. That's the fun part about a 600 bike. Going over the controls on the R6, you know, it's interesting how it's nothing special really, you know, like that's what's kind of crazy about it is you'd think an R6, you're like, wow, legendary bike, something that's going to feel really special, really unique, really different. It doesn't, honestly. It's just, it's so dialed in. That's the difference of the R6 versus other 600 bikes like the ZX6 or the CBR 600 from factory. The R6 is just dialed, man. It just makes power. You can tell it just wants to frickin' go. And the controls are very, very neutral feeling. They don't feel like anything special. Like I'll grab a gear down here, like this one needs the front brake master cylinder bled a little bit, but otherwise throttle control here on the R6 is really nice. It's a motorcycle you can get along with pretty well. You can ride these tar snakes, no problem. Couple bumps in the road. Feels a little squirrely on exit just because we have so many of these tar snakes here. Cruise through here. We're at an easy, chill street pace. Can't wait to get this bike out on track, but we're just cruising here. Temperature dropping a little bit. I probably don't have that much heat in my tires because we're just cruising that street pace right here. But it's still really fun to ride. Like, you feel like Ricky Racer, like I said. I mean, look at this thing scream. We're at 10,000 RPM. I got 6,000 more to go. It's so zany. It reminds me so much of when I was 22 years old with my Daytona, just being a complete dummy. Being a total dummy on the street, man. That never really goes away, you know? People can say whatever they want. Yes, you do mature, you learn to pick your moments, pick your spots, but once a squid, always a squid, man. That's what I say. I mean, I own a Turbo Hayabusa, right? Hey, we made it, what, 12 minutes in the video? 13 minutes in the video before I mentioned it? So yeah, all the controls work exactly as you would expect them to. You know, it's a motorcycle that basically the gearbox is perfect. It's snickety, it's precise, it's accurate. You can hit any gear you want to hit. You know how to find neutral when you need to at a stop. Clutch feel feels great. This lever's a little weird, but that's an easy fix. That's not the bike's fault. Front brake feel, right? Stock master cylinder definitely needs a bit of an upgrade. Kind of bad braking feel, but I think that's just going to be a maintenance issue, really. Let's see how it handles some bumps. It's not particularly happy doing that, that's for sure. It's not an ADV bike, but you can still go over a speed bump at 33 miles an hour. That's no problem. Let's hit this one to closer to 40. The chain jumps a little bit, but that's okay. That's what a motorcycle's for. But it feels every bit like you think. It's exactly like you think it would be, you know, but also somehow better. They always say to never meet your heroes, and like I said in the reveal video for this thing, I've always wanted an R6, always. It's always been the Halo bike, this generation specifically, the 08 to 2016 version. I've always wanted this particular bike, especially in black. I think it looks killer. And, you know, I ultimately went with the Daytona because I thought it was more exotic and cool, and I don't regret it even slightly, but there's still something special about these bikes, and I hope that they stay on the road for a long time, because you're never going to see something like this ever again. Once they phase out all these bikes, you know, we're getting close. Suzuki's probably going to phase them out real soon, and then I think Kawasaki's going to be next, and then maybe Honda, kind of a final holdout, or maybe it's Honda Kawasaki first, because Yamaha already only sells this to you race prepped and track prep, which is, it's egregious what they want for the price for this thing. I think they want like 18 grand out the door. You should never pay that much money. But the big problem is, so full disclosure, I paid $6,000 for this motorcycle, right? And a lot of you might say, oh my God, Yami, it's an 08 with like 16,000 miles. You paid that much money. But R6s are literally appreciating in value. Let's see if we get the green here. Yes, we do. Oh, I can't wait to get this thing on track. It's not fair. It's not fair. So they're appreciating in value, man. I got quoted 12 grand out the door for a 2012 at a different dealership, so I had to buy this one privately. And that's what you got to do nowadays. Like, you got to find these private and kind of lowball the seller a little bit and hope that you can get something. But they're really kind of hot commodities right now. So honestly, whoever wins this bike, hold on to it, and it'll be worth twice. It'll be easily be worth twice $6,000 in like 5 to 10 years, because they're just not making them anymore. It's kind of a big deal to have an R6 and to make an R6, you know, so they're just not providing those anymore. This motorcycle is just going to keep going up in value, and those of you who hold on to good ones and don't completely obliterate them at the track, it'll hold its value. But I honestly think that the value in an R6 is as a track day toy. It is not sitting in your garage and you waiting for it to earn an extra $4,000 or $5,000. The experience of riding these bikes is worth so much more than $4,000 or $5,000 extra dollars in your pocket. These bikes have so much to teach you. They can offer you so much. They feel amazing to ride, and I love them. Despite the fact that it's obviously not a good street bike. I'd rather be on a Yamaha MT bike right now. But at the same time, did you just hear what it did on the revs? It's incredible. It's incredible what these bikes can do. And again, the feeling is just sublime, you know? The feeling of an R6 is just like nothing else, and we buy motorcycles to feel things. We don't buy them unless you're a Versus 650 warrior. You know, you don't buy a motorcycle just because it's the best in the category and it's gonna have the perfect MPGs and blah, blah, blah. Like, man, the way this engine screams just makes me feel alive, and the fact that not many people get to experience this makes me sad, honestly. I know that people love high revving cars. Like, there's some 911 in front of me right now, and one of my favorite cars is the GT3 RS, right? Any generation, but particularly the 07, right? Similar year to when this one came out. I'm kind of dating myself a little bit because I love all the old mid-2000s stuff, right? But you know, that car revved to about 9,000 RPM. This thing revs to 15,500 RPM. And you can feel it and hear it, and it's so visceral. Nothing even comes close to what this thing can do. And, okay, look, R6 boys, here's the thing. The bike is incredible, right? But it's not that fast. I think people vastly overstate how fast these bikes are. Stock gearing and stock power, you're never going to get this thing even close to 186 like they always say online. You're going to need some tall gears and tons of engine work to get this to 186, if that's even possible. It's probably not. But Yeah, unless you're talking some full-blown race-prepped R6 at, like, Banks of Daytona, sure, maybe, but not your average Street Warrior R6, that's for sure. But, yeah, there's nothing like the feeling of these bikes, man. They're just incredible, and I want to preserve them as much as possible. And I'm so thankful that I even get to experience it for a short amount of time with the giveaway bike, because it's so special to be able to ride an R6. I can't believe how rigid this motorcycle is. It's like I'm literally riding a 2x4. Whoa, didn't mean to sound like that, but y'all know what I mean. So here's the thing, I've ridden the 636 a bunch. We actually gave away one of those last year. I have track experience on a 636. I've ridden it several times on track. I've actually ridden an R6 several times on track too. And to be perfectly honest, I do think that the 636 with the extra cubes is a better street bike, and it's a better overall package. But I don't know, dude, there's something special about the R6. It has like a freaking 2-stroke Powerband. It's unique, it's rare, it's different. You don't get bikes like this anymore. And I think we have to preserve them, you know? You have to acknowledge the fact that this bike is unique, and it's not trying to be streetable. It's not trying to have torque in the middle. It's trying to freaking go fast, dude. It's all it wants to do. And it's funny because, you know, you ride a new R1, a new Street Fighter V4S, H2. I mean, those bikes are absurdly fast. Like, you lose your license in 2 seconds fast. But the R6, again, to be honest, you can actually play with it a little bit. It's a teensy bit beyond the reach of most mortals, right, on the street. Well, not a teensy bit, it's a lot beyond that kind of stuff, right? But I think what's really cool about this bike is it allows you to explore and feel like you're leaving a little bit on the table. When you ride something like an SV650, you got 75 horsepower, you can actually use almost all of that on the street. You can actually go wide open at an apex and carry a bunch of speed. It's not advisable, but you can do it, and that's pretty cool. Whereas the R6, you're always like, I definitely could have hit that a little harder. And that's what's cool about it too, is on track, you always feel like you can get a little bit more out of it, you know? You're always leaving a little bit on the table with it on the track, which is really fun. You can actually get after it, and lap after lap, you're like, no, the bike's got more in it, because you look at a professional's lap time on an R6, and you're like, oh my God, that's, how are they even doing that on the same bike, you know? It's such a great feeling. Here's the big thing too. People always talk about how uncomfortable these bikes are, and they are definitely uncomfortable. I have a torn ligament in my T5 vertebrae on my back that never healed up right, and it's always been a bit of an issue for me riding these kind of bikes with a backpack on, especially. I don't have one on today because I wanted to preserve my back a little bit. It can be pretty harmful after a long period of time. Eventually I want to get off the bike and stretch my back a little bit, but you also have to learn how to ride them, you know? This is something that not a lot of people talk about. They just assume that, you know, it's like, oh, just get on the bike, put all the weight into your wrists, and it hurts, and just it is what it is. If you squeeze the tank on these bikes, and you lighten up your grip a little bit, and you learn how to build that muscle, it's actually completely doable, and you can ride it for as long as you want. It's kind of like when you, if any of you are familiar with cycling, you know, it's the difference between riding a mountain bike and a road bike, right? Like a road bike, when it's properly set up, seats high, you're in this aggressive position, it's because you're trying to get into an aero position and go fast. It's the same thing with this R6. You're being put in a position for a reason. You're in this tuck so that you can be one with the bike and be fully tucked right in there with it, right? You're not going to be, you know, riding this thing around like a mountain bike. That's not what it's for. It's for going fast. So I think learning how to ride the bike and learning how to squeeze the tank, get some tank grips on these things, and you can really lighten up the grip and learn how to ride it, you know? I did that for years on my Daytona, my 675. I rode it on street duty for a whole long time. And, you know, I never felt like it was awful. And granted, I was younger. I didn't know as much about motorcycling as I do now. But it wasn't the case where I was like, oh, like, get me the hell off this thing. I absolutely need to, you know, ride something that's a little bit more upright. One thing that's interesting about this bike is the power band, right? Like, people always say, oh, you really got to rev them to get much out of them. They're not very fast down low. And that's true, they're not. But at the same time, you're not that often below 8,000 RPM on one of these things because they feel terrible to ride like that, you know? These motorcycles, if you get them below 8,000 RPM, like I am right now, I'm kind of lugging it on purpose to show you guys. It's not very happy with me, you know? Like, it's like, what are we doing, you know? And this one especially, I can tell it's got an ECU flash and the full exhaust. They definitely tuned it and advanced the ignition timing a little bit for more top-end power, because my Daytona feels exactly like this. I've ridden around my Daytona, not on the street, not like this, but in front of my shop a couple times to test some things, and it's exactly like this. Like, low down in the revs, the bike is just super unhappy. And it's the same with this bike. And so what you do is you don't leave it low in the revs. Like I said, you have to ride the bike a little differently and understand what it's trying to do. If you're behind yet another SUV on today's ride, instead of second gear, you might want to leave it in first gear. And it sounds a little painful for the bike, but you got to remember, these bikes are designed to rev. There is no problem in revving an R6. That's what it's made for. That's what it wants to do. And ultimately, that's what you should be doing on it, because you got to be revving these things, man. Absolutely. So what do I rate the R6 before we get into the Discord questions on this video? Well, I think this bike, it's so hard to rate it as like a street bike, right? Because like it's this legendary bike, it does all these amazing things, and I just think it's just a wonderful thing. And so it's hard to rate it because I also have a huge bias towards it. I think it's an amazing motorcycle, but to be perfectly honest, there are way better street bike options out there. You know, you can get yourself, even an MT-07 would be so much better than this R6, but sure as hell don't feel like this. Sure as hell don't feel like you can enjoy the bike. I laugh at myself because I'm like, I'm literally turning into a street squid while riding this thing. Okay, I'll be honest. Okay, before we get into the Discord section, I'm gonna rate this bike on the street like a 6.5 out of 10. For like a overall motorcycling experience, this is like a 9 out of 10 for me. This is incredible. I love the way this thing makes me feel. Makes me feel like a superhero, like a superstar. It's so much fun to ride. Actually, let's go straight here. It's so much fun to ride. It's so incredible. And for the feeling it gives me, yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. It's fantastic. But with all that being said, let's jump over to the Discord questions and answer what the people want to know about the R6. Let's do it. All right, boys, back here in the shop answering the Discord questions, which, by the way, if you want to join the Discord and get max entries to win this bike for the month, head over to yamanoob.co and become a member. But let's get into these questions. Maximum Warp asks, is the 08 R6 the best beginner bike or just a very good one? All jokes aside, this is a terrible beginner bike. It's extremely aggressive, extremely pitched over. You're not going to learn best on this thing, despite what people online may tell you that it's a great beginner bike and a good option. Don't do that. Don't do that. Prez asks, is the R6 as much of a squid missile as everyone says, or does the Gixxer remain supreme? And does it get good gas mileage if you don't ring it out? I bet you this bike actually would get pretty decent gas mileage if you did not rev the nuts off of it, but it kind of begs you to rev the nuts off of it. It's hard to ride this bike and not just want to absolutely rail it around. And it is kind of a squid missile. There's a reason why squids love these bikes, and it's because they're very fun to ride in a squid-like manner. But I do think Gixxers have them beat. Metalhead89 says, how does the R6 compare to your 675? Well, they're very different. My 675 makes broad linear torque all the way in the middle, all the way to the top end, but this thing just has a totally different power band. It really kinks up. I can tell that the R6's frame is a little bit more rigid, side to side. Spoiler alert, I've taken several R6s out on track, so I'm speaking track day experience as well. But I think the Daytona just sits a little bit more narrow. The R6 is a little wider, a little fatter. So that is something, because obviously it does have that extra cylinder. So the Daytona that I have over there somewhere is a little bit more kind of just narrow and more fun and flickable, I would say. Henthorn Performance asks, is the R6 as glorious as everyone makes it out to be, or overrated squid bike? I really think it's very glorious. I love this motorcycle. It has all the panache and quality that you want from a high-revving sport bike, and it's a quintessential thing. And I mean, just freaking look at it, man. Come on. It's the best. It looks so sweet. You can't really go wrong with an R6, man. You can't go wrong. Not That Nate asks, how long does it take for your back to start hurting on the R6? For me personally, about 45 minutes in, I kind of want to get off the thing. That's just because I do have a torn ligament in my vertebrae, and that causes some compromising issues for me on the bike. But I would say if you're spry and you don't have any back issues, you could probably ride this for about 2 hours without really wanting to hurt yourself. Stank Nooter asks, which sprocket combination will put you on it to get to the elusive 186 miles per hour? Okay, so I really think that to get to genuinely get 186 out of this bike, you're gonna have to drop like 6 teeth in the rear, maybe plus 1 in the front or plus 2 in the front, and then it just would be comically long geared, right? And then you're gonna want a lot of engine performance, and you know what? Slap a turbo on it. Why not? Then you'll get it to 186. Scooterbud asks, what is the perfect starter bike and why is it the R6? Everybody wants to goof and start on the R6. I think it's because there's so many videos online where guys tell you like, yeah, bro, I started an R6 and I'm fine, bro, yeah, and then they have no idea how to ride. So that's, I think, pretty tough. Trail 125ist asks, will the value appreciate to 12K by the time of the giveaway? I don't know if it's going to appreciate that much, but I could probably flip this today as is for at least $8,500 on the market, guaranteed. It's crazy, the R6 market right now. Hitch D says, how fast is the R6 compared to the V4, like 0 to blank or rolling from 40 to blank? How nimble is it? Are the ergos really that bad? Okay, so the R6 cannot even touch the V4. The V4 is so much faster. I think that's pretty obvious. Yeah, it's not going to touch it anywhere. And it's very nimble. It's extremely telepathic in the way that it handles, and it's very darty and wants to like fall into corners. It's really fun, and the ergos are genuinely awful. Adam Enid asks, now that it and all the other 600s aren't being sold as new anymore, what's left if you want something faster than an SV650 but want to actually ride it as opposed to surviving on a 1000? Small local track known as Der Ring is about 60 to 90 miles south of here, and the weather is quite nice too. In before R660, and that's the easy answer and thus doesn't count. Also R9 when. Something like the R6 but not an R660. I mean, R7. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but an R7 does get you a lot of the super sport feelings that this bike gives you, but the magic of this engine is lost completely when you ride an R7. And it's a totally different experience, right? Like an R7 is just like a fun, peppy sport bike. It's still really great and fun, and it does wheelies really great too, but dude, the R6 is special. It's just special. And I remember when Spite and I did an R7 versus R6 video back-to-back, that was our takeaway too. We're like, dude, the R6 is just special. I don't know. It's unique. It's so good. And I think that's all the questions we had. So, folks, thanks so much for coming along today for the ride. I hope you've enjoyed this look and first ride impression on the Yamaha R6. We have so much content coming out with this bike. It's obscene. We're going to compare it against the 20660. We're going to do KTM RC390 redlining versus R6 up to $8,000 to see if this bike is actually slower than a beginner bike, unless you get into the Powerband. Bunch of track day mods, bunch of good stuff on this bike. I am over the moon that we have this motorcycle as a giveaway bike. I'm ecstatic to have this in the shop. Of course I am, because I'm a freaking Yamaha squid. So, hit that link below, yamanoob.co. Become a member and get max entries for the month. That is the best way to get entered to win this thing. Alternatively, you can also get 3x entries and become a member on shop.yamanoob.co. That's going to be a great way to do it too. Catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Well, look at you. You've made it to the end of another Yami Noob video. You should consider yourself pretty lucky because I have curated this one right over here for you to continue watching. It's probably just as good as the one you just saw. Unless you hated the one you just saw. I don't know, maybe leave me a comment down below about how much you hated it as well too. Or just keep watching this one. Make sure you keep watching Yami Noob. Don't forget to keep watching Yami Noob. That's the most important thing. Keep watching Yami Noob.